Walk with me.
God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore will not we fear, though the earth be removed, and though the mountains be carried into the midst of the sea, though the waters thereof roar and be troubled through the mountains, shake with the swelling thereof. Selah. There is a river, the streams whereof shall make glad the city of God, and the holy place of the tabernacles of the Most High. God is in the midst of her, and she shall not be moved. God shall help her, and that right early. The heathen raged, the kingdoms were moved. He uttered his voice, the earth melted. The I am of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our refuge, Selah. Come, behold the works of the I am, what desolation he hath made in the earth. He maketh wars to cease, and unto the end of the earth. He breaketh the bow, and cutteth the spear in sunder, and he burneth the chariot in fire. Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the heathen, and I will be exalted in the earth. The I am of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our refuge. Selah. Yes, good. Deliver me. I'm about to skip before I get to where I'm supposed to go. Deliver me from the hands of evil spirits who have sway over the thoughts and men's hearts, and let them not lead me astray from thee, my God. Establish thou me in my seed forever, that we go not astray from henceforth and forevermore. Jubilees chapter 12 and verse 20. Yes, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, those of you on this platform and shared platforms. We thank God for you, and we also, with a hand clap of praise, we thank God for those of you that have been with us since the beginning, and we thank God for those of you who have been with us there, here, and there's about, and continue to be there, and we thank God for those of you who have just subscribed, and calling those of you that have about to subscribe, calling those things that are not as though they are. Yes. Yes, all praises, all praises, all praises to the Most High, even him that inhabits all things. Yes. Yes, we're in the book of Jasher. Yes, Jasher Chapter, I believe that's 43. I always lose my place when I go back reading. 42, chapter 42. Of the book of Jasher, and we ended in verse 18, where the Midianites saw Joseph. His brothers, as I said before, they were no stranger to bloodshed. They wasn't no stranger to war. There was no stranger to atrocity. And the Midianites saw Joseph. They saw he was a good-looking little young man and well-favored. In other words, they desired him in their hearts and were urgent to purchase him from his brother. Yes, because these were the things that many of the rich Egyptians or rich would desire to be their servants. It's someone that they have to see every day, but they can, it's just like saying, can I wake up with you? Not in a way as man and woman, but a way of a servant. So these things were very, should I say, desired in that time. Verse 19, and the sons of Jacob hearkened unto the Midianites, and they sold their brother Joseph to them. You know, after the big argument, and they said Joseph looked better than they did, they sold him for 20 pieces of silver. And Reuben, their brother, was not with them. And the Midianites took Joseph and continued their journey to Gilead. And they were going along the road, and the Midianites repented of what they had done in having purchased the young man. And one said to the other, what is this thing that we have done in taking this youth from the Hebrews. Now you have to remember, this is an angel. This is a spirit that's before God that was sent to teach Moses of the history of his people, because that history has gotten lost over the 400-year period. Now he's teaching Moses, and it's no big thing to know that these angels record and they remember every last detail of what was going on during that time. Now, and perhaps this youth was stolen from the land. We're in verse 21. From the land of the Hebrews, or Eber. You see Eber and Ebri in the middle of that. The H and the WS, yes. There's so many things that have been covered up in the previous years. And why then have we done this thing? And if we should be sought for and found in our if he should be sought for and found in our hands, we shall die through him. In other words, they understood that he was a son of Jacob, even of Abraham and Isaac, who have been most gracious unto the people of Canaan. Now, sure-heartedly and powerful men have sold him to us. In other words, they knew that God was with those men, those young men, the sons of Jacob. The strength of one of whom you saw this day, perhaps they stole him from his land with their might. They did not understand that he was their brother with their powerful arm, and have therefore sold him to us for the small value which we gave unto them. You know, this man, this young boy was of great worth, to those who would have servants. And while they were thus discoursing together, they looked, and behold, the company of Ishmaelites. Now here come the Ishmaelites again, which was coming at first. Now the Ishmaelites, still, they're all cousins. All of these are cousins. The Midianites, Ishmaelites, these are sons of Shem, Ham, Japheth. Yes, they're cousins. Far removed, distant cousins, or whatever you want to call them, but they didn't see it that way. Just as many of us, we don't see it this way today. We call one great, one lesser, but still from the same man, Noah. And Jacob saw it was advancing toward the Midianites, and the Midianites said to each other, "Come, let us sell this youth to the company of the Ishmaelites, who are coming toward us, and we will take for him the little that we gave for him, and we will be delivered from this evil." See, many of them knew of the spirits of that day. These were spiritual people. From all the way from Noah all the way to now, where we read, in this present time where we read this present narrative. They were very spiritual people. They understood they were evil spirits, as well as even one great spirit, who is the Most High. Yes, they knew this thing. It's no wonder these books were hidden. I can really understand why they were hidden. Now, who are coming toward us, and we will take for him a little that we have gave for him, and we will be delivered from his evil. And they did so, and they reached the Ishmaelites, and the Midianites sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver. In other words, they got their money back. Silver, which they had given for him to his brethren. In other words, we're going to be just in this cause. We're just going to get our money back and sell this guy, and we through. They did not steal him. It was his brothers that stole him, that really committed the sin and sold him. Now, they didn't want to have nothing to do with him, but yet they sold him to other slavers. Now, this is where the two wrongs don't make a right. In other words, they were trying. They should have just gave him back to his brothers. Now, and the Midianites went on their road to Gilead, and the Ishmaelites took Joseph, and they let him ride upon one of the camels, and they were leading him to Egypt. And Joseph heard that the Ishmaelites were proceeding to Egypt, and Joseph lamented. He was crying, wept at this thing, that he was to be so far removed from the land of Canaan, from his father. And he wept bitterly whilst he was riding upon the camel. And one of their men observed him and made him go down from the camel and walk on foot. And notwithstanding this, Joseph continued to cry and weep. And he said, "Oh, my father, my father." As he was crying to his father at this time. Now, he was His father living. His father living. He was crying to him. He couldn't see him. No, that's not ancestral worship. No, that's a man in anguish who's trying to some kind of way reach somebody or hope that somebody come and rescue him. And one of the Ishmaelites rose up and smote Joseph upon the cheek. It was just smacked him. And Joseph upon the cheek and still continued to weep. It wasn't because of the smack. Joseph wasn't far removed from pain and war because his brothers. And Joseph was fatigued in the road and was unable to proceed on account of the bitterness of his soul. You have to remember, God will take you to the point of, he'll allow you to go to the point of death and then deliver you. He'll allow time to pass you over to the point where you just about give up hope, then deliver you. And depending on what you do in that time and how your test goes, he can allow you to be demised. Tough stuff, but that's God. Flesh, he said, the nations of the earth are nothing before me. They're less than a drop in a bucket. They're less than that. In other words, you don't know the power of God. You judge God. Many of you judge God. You tell God who he is instead of him telling you what you should do, or that you understand and know me, that I am God. God. He causes spirits to be created, whether they're good or evil. That's why he says I create good and evil. It's good to the person that is following his laws, statutes, and commandments and ordinances, and it's evil to the poor person who walks contrary. What God does. And Joseph was fatigued in the road, unable to proceed on account of the bitterness of his soul, and they all smote him and afflicted him in the road. Now, to them, he was nothing but a slave, these Ishmaelites, not knowing they was his cousins. And they terrified him in order that he might cease from reaping. Stop crying, stop crying. And the I Am saw the ambition of Joseph and his trouble. And the I Am brought down upon those men darkness and confusion, and the hand of everyone that smote him became withered. In other words, God just let it go. You heard in the New Testament of the man with the withered hand. And they said to each other, what is this thing that God has... They knew who God was. They knew who God is. Done to us in the road. And they knew not that this befell them on account of Joseph. They did not take into account that maybe this guy got some type of anointing about him, or God is with this man. And the men proceeded on the road, and they passed along the road of Ephrat, or Bethlehem, as you call it today. Now, Bethlehem is really just about a bow shot or so from even Jerusalem, even Tel Arad, because that land is to remain barren until it enjoys its Sabbath. And it is plowed under. And Joseph reached his mother's grave. He was there where he saw the grave of Rachel. And I made a mistake yesterday. Rachel had died when Joseph, at the time of Benoni, Rachel died in childbirth, and that was before Joseph turned 17. And Joseph has hastened and ran to his mother's grave and fell upon the grave and wept. This guy was he was just really, the young man was just so just in awe, in sorrow and grief that he should be counted as low as nothing before his own brothers and taken away from what he knew. Can you imagine the enslavement, those who were enslaved and taken and put on ships, that they would prefer death over coming to a land that they would be treated with such abhorrence, raped and murdered and tested on and treated low as dirt, and even to this day, we're looked upon as nothing. But yet, because of saving face before the nations, many that have to do with this try to contain themselves, but yet they still kill us all the day long. Yes. And Joseph cried aloud upon his mother's grave. Now, he fell upon his mother's grave. He found it some kind of way. They came across his mother's grave, and he knew what it was. And Joseph cried aloud upon his mother's grave. I mean, he wanted somebody. First, he hollered for his father. This is not ancestral worship. And then upon his mother, he said, "Oh, my mother, my mother. Oh, thou who didst give me birth." In other words, somebody, awake now. He's trying to raise the dead. "And arise thee, and see thy son, how he has been sold for a slave." Can you imagine the anguish of those who were taken upon the good ship Jesus and all the other ships that took them across the sea in order to just treat them less than dogs? And now the same people treat each other less than dogs. A dog is a dog, regardless. He's going to do what you say do regardless. You can knock him upside the head, beat him, slam him. Doesn't matter. And you say sit, that's what he's going to do, sit. "And see the heart of my brethren. Arouse, my mother, arouse, wake." He's in verse 33. "Thy sleep for me, and direct thy battles against my brethren. Oh, how have they stripped me of my coat." In other words, the coat of my father's love for me, coat of many colors, "and sold me already twice for a slave, and separated me from my father, and there is no one to pity me." I mean, he didn't cry to the I am. For some reason, he didn't do this. "And arouse and lay their cause against them before God, and see whom God will justify in judgment, and whom he will condemn." He didn't understand what was going on at that time. Still in transition from boy to man. And 35, "Arise, O my mother, arise." In other words, he's trying to resurrect his mother. Come on, help me, somebody. Ancestors cannot help you. Now, God can give them a voice to speak to you, as he did here. He can call them. If you go to the book of Enoch, they can call from the grave. But that's only in certain situations. I mean, your anguish, yes, it's understandable. God sees more than what you see. He understands more than what you understand. Even you can't call a person like this a pagan in his anguish. He cannot see. They only learn the word of God through their father as he read from the books that he received of his fathers that was carried across the flood, even Noah, Shem, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He learned those things that they've taught him, but only so vaguely because he was still coming up. And his sons really forsook some of the things that God had showed him, because if not, the firstborn wouldn't have laid with his father's concubine. He said, "Awake from my sleep and see my father, how his soul is with me this day, and comfort him and ease his heart." And Joseph continued to speak these words, and Joseph cried aloud and wept bitterly unto his mother's grave. God saw this. God had to have compassion. So this is what God did. And he's speaking from the bitterness of his heart. He became still as a stone upon the grave, and Joseph heard the voice speaking to him from beneath the ground, which answered him with bitterness of heart. See, this is where some of the things you get in your movies, they've read this thing before you. But yet they say, "Oh, this book just popped up." This book never popped up. Book been here. They just kept it from the people. That's it. Even the book of Jasher, the book of Enoch, and the book of Jubilees. And Joseph heard speaking from beneath the ground. This is not ancestral worship. This is not ancestors will not hearken unto you. Many times, if you hear a voice, if it's not that which God had put before you, it's a familiar spirit that's familiar with the life of that person. And God forbid these things to happen. Now, with the voice of weeping, praying in these words, she said, my son, Joseph, I have heard the voice of thy weeping and the voice of thy lamentation. I've seen thy tears. Notice God let her see this, because if you look in the book of Enoch, she's in the place where the poor man was. There's a place with streams. Enoch describes it so vividly. There's a place. It's a beautiful garden. Beautiful garden means paradise or paradisio in the old Persian language. When they say paradise, I have a paradise here. I have a beautiful garden. You know, whether it's not in the back, but in the front. But either way, a beautiful garden, paradisio. Many have many paradises, but we've taken and it's been construed. Many things can be construed unto you that will change the whole meaning of a word, which answered him in bitterness of heart. And she said, I have seen thy tears, I know thy troubles, my son, and it grieves me. For thy sake, and abundant grief is added to my grief. Now therefore, my son Joseph, hope to the I am, and wait for him, and do not fear. In other words, in all this, Joseph, he didn't remember the I am. Now he remembers him. He's called to remember him from the voice of his mother, that the I am have allowed to come from the grave, even from that area where even the prayer and the blood of Abel cried unto the Most High. See, if you haven't read these books, you don't understand what I'm saying or where I've come from. Go back and read them if you don't understand me. He said, rise, my son, go down to Egypt with thy masters, and do not fear, for the I am is with thee, my son. And she continued to speak like unto these words unto Joseph, and she was still. Now, God kept her from crying. That's the only time where you hear in the word the Most High, other than that of Samuel, when Saul came to him through the witch of Endor, that God allowed him to come up and speak to Samuel, and showing that he had sinned. See, God allows certain things, but we cannot take these things to heart. If he says don't do these things like the witch of Endor, it is sin. Now, the witch of Endor should have been put to death according to the law, statutes, and ordinances of the Most High. Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live, is what God says. She should have been demised, deleted. Now, she continued to speak like unto these words. And Joseph heard this, and he continued to weep. And after this, one of the Ishmaelites observed him crying and weeping upon the grave of his, and his anger was kindled against him. These were devils. See, you have to realize, in this day and time, the thing is so true. We wrestle not against flesh and blood. Now, it manifests itself through flesh and blood, but that's not who we're wrestling against. We're wrestling against principalities and powers, rulers of this dark world. They come in the minds of politicians, your leaders, even those of you that are on the continent of Africa. Your leaders being led by these devils are swayed to say, hey, maybe I should sell these people out because this is a lost cause. There's some kind of way these devils have swayed their minds to selling out of millions just for his own convenience and his own comfort. In other words, counting his own people nothing. The same thing in the U.S., selling out his own people for nothing. On the streets, in the midst of everything, not even having jobs. And then you got those who are here, and it's a land of milk and honey, or should I say. And folks are on the ground sleeping and make pretty good money, but can't afford the rent because of what is going on. I mean, a free-for-all. This is why you've been told. I don't care if you have to go out in the desert and buy you some land. You need to go buy land. That way nobody can mess with you. There's plenty of land in the deserts and desert areas and mountainous areas for sale, and you can buy them and live there. Yes, but many of you so used to convenience. You can grow food, you can get food, even if you have to walk or take a wagon. All you need is just a few pew-pews and you good. At least you can fend off the wild animals. Get out of it. You have to leave the cities as much as possible, especially these major cities. The major cities are not, they're too compact. This is how preachers and all kind of people make money. They see the concentration of the population and they prey upon this in order to get all the people to come together. In other words, if I got 1 million people giving me $1, I'm a millionaire. Now, you times that 100 or times that at $25 or even $5 for a morsel of food. This is how this works. It's called capitalism. And Joseph said unto the men, may I find favor or grace in your sight? Oh, so they got grace too here. So he was saved by grace with nothing. He never asked. He said, my favor, to take me back to my father's house. In other words, there was no works. There was nothing they could profit from giving him grace to take him back. And he will give you abundance of riches. And they answered him, saying, art thou not a slave? Where is thy father? And if thou hadst a father, thou wouldst not already twice have been sold for a slave. Now, this is the mentality of those around you, even those in this land, those of you who are children of those who were enslaved. Look at this mentality. They cannot see you as anything equal, but most lesser. Many cannot see you as anything equal. And if anything they come to equal, there's still some inkling in the heart that will tell them you're less than them. You think I'm kidding? Keep on. Something's going to come out that really reminds you that you're not equal. I don't even know why you're even trying. But either way, he says that you're a slave. In other words, that's their mentality. We found you, you were a slave. For you, you come out of slavery. You still a slave. Regardless of whether they make the same amount or you make more than them, you are not equal to these people who have this mentality. This is the auspices of devils. This has been sneered on the heart of certain people. Yes. And if thou hadst a father, thou wouldst already be twice. Thou wouldst not already be. This is their understanding. Pull yourself by your own bootstraps. Come on here. God gives you wisdom if you can see it and you ask him for it. For so little value. In other words, first hired, last hired, first fired. Yes, you'll look as less than nothing. I don't care how rich you are. We can take the example of Bill Cosby. No matter how much money he had, they would still accept the over evidence, accept just the word of someone. Look at Emmett Till, just the word of someone. You're a slave, you're less, you have nothing, you're a scapegoat. But God shall avenge his people, period. Now, in wrapping this up, he says now, and they continue to smite him and chastise him just like they did. This is something God is trying to say here. They hid it. 44, and the I am saw Joseph's affliction, and the I am again to smote these men and chastise them. And the I am caused darkness to envelop them, upon them. Even he caused wars and all kind of things with these people, but yet they still were relentless. And the lightning flashed, and the thunder roared, and the earth shook. And at the voice of the thunder and of the mighty wind, the men were terrified and knew not where they should go. And with this, we're going to say, peace.
Walk with me.